Why did she always sit with her back to the wall? Even on a commercial flight, even on a spring afternoon when the air smelled of new beginnings and people shuffled with boarding passes, Martinez caught herself scanning the exits, memorizing the emergency rows, measuring the distance to the galley. Civilian habits were hard to relearn when 8 years of her life had been lived in a cockpit painted gray and humming with tension. She settled into seat 22, see the way soldiers settle into foxholes, quietly, deliberately, with eyes that never really rest. Around her, people lived the lives she thought she wanted for herself. A businessman with glossy hair and a laptop open before the wheels even left the tarmac. A mother across the aisle reading to her child in a whisper. College students in the back laughing too loud. Normal lives, untouched lives. Had promised herself she'd have one of those by now. 2 years out of uniform, 2 years trying to breathe air that wasn't laced with jet fuel or fear. 2 years running a little aircraft restoration shop in Phoenix, trying to sand down the rough edges of memory and maybe rebuild herself in the process. She thought she was getting there. She thought she could finally do something as ordinary as fly to Denver for the weekend to see her sister. But at 30,000 feet, ordinary betrayed her. It began with a whisper of motion. Most would have missed it. Most passengers were too busy flipping through magazines or ordering sodas to notice the subtle curve in the aircraft's track. But was most. She felt it in her bones, that clean, precise arc of a course correction, too deliberate, too exacting to be turbulence avoidance. Her eyes snapped open. She turned to the window, pressing her hand against the glare, shielding the cabin reflection. At first the sky looked the same, high, open, endless, but then she caught them. Thin contrails, distant but sure, not scattered like commercial routes, not random like crossing traffic. No, these moved with intent, tight, disciplined, formation. Her stomach tightened. The man beside her kept typing. The toddler giggled at a picture book. The hum of life went on uninterrupted, while felt a knot pull inside her chest. And then she saw it. Not a shadow, not a trick of light. A shape, colossal, steady, painted in blues and whites that even at a distance were unmistakable. It held to their starboard side like a guardian or a warning. Air Force One. Her breath froze in her lungs. She blinked, hoping she was wrong, hoping her mind had conjured some illusion out of the afternoon haze. But no, there it was, the president's aircraft, flying so close she could almost imagine reaching across the sky and brushing her hand against it. And knew enough to know this wasn't possible, not by chance, not by mistake. Air Force One didn't share airspace. Entire corridors were cleared when it moved. Traffic was diverted hundreds of miles away. This was wrong. She pulled back into her seat, heartbeat ticking faster. Why? Why would Air Force One shadow a routine Meridian Airways flight from Phoenix to Denver? The intercom hissed. "Ladies and," the captain's voice came, calm and unshaken, the kind of voice designed to soothe without revealing its own tremor. "We're experiencing minor communication issues with air traffic control. You may notice some course adjustments as we coordinate. Nothing unusual. We expect to arrive in Denver on time." Closed her eyes. She'd spoken words like that herself, wrapped lies in velvet for crews who couldn't handle the truth. Minor communication issues meant something very different in the language of pilots. It meant keep calm because nothing I can tell you will help. Her fingers gripped the armrest. Something wasn't right. And then through the hum of the cabin, through the muted thrum of engines, she heard it. The crackle, the hiss, a frequency bleeding through just enough for trained ears. She tilted her head, straining, praying she was wrong. But no, the clipped edge of encrypted military comms spilled faintly into the cabin, voices coded, disciplined. And then came the one sound that cut her to the marrow. Meridian 638, Presidential Escort Formation acknowledged. Falcon 9, confirm your status. The blood left her face. Falcon 9. Her call sign, buried, locked, sealed 8 years ago when she walked away from combat missions and tried to build something resembling a normal life. No civilian pilot should have it. No air traffic controller should even whisper it. Yet here it was, spoken like a knife slipped between her ribs. She swallowed hard, willing her body not to shake, but her grip betrayed her. Her knuckles blanched white on the armrest. Whoever was speaking into that frequency, they knew exactly who sat in seat 22C. Around her, the world stayed blind. A baby's cry, a ding of a light, the businessman tapping away, muttering about profit margins. They lived in blissful ignorance whilst reality narrowed to a single, unanswerable question. Were they protecting her or hunting her? Her gaze returned to the sky, scanning every shadow, every glint of contrail. More aircraft appeared now, smaller, sharper, fighter silhouettes sliding into position with predatory grace. The formation was deliberate, expanding, surrounding. Not a sky, a cage. Her throat tightened with the memory of missions long gone, tight formations over hostile ground, escorts over burning cities. That weight of knowing one misstep meant a dozen lives lost. But this wasn't war. This was a passenger flight carrying mothers and children and students on their way home. And the cage wasn't closing around the president. It was closing around her. She forced herself to breathe, steady, calm. What had she done? What thread from her past had tugged her back into this storm? For 2 years she had lived quietly. No missions, no orders, no secrets. But someone hadn't let her go. The captain's voice returned, thinner this time. The professional calm stretched to its breaking point. Ladies and Air Traffic Control has directed us to make a precautionary landing at Space Force Base in Colorado Springs. Nothing unusual, just a brief stop before continuing to Denver. We expect to be back in the air within the hour. A base locked tight with security measures beyond anything civilian. Not an airport where delays smoothed over with apologies and free vouchers. His heart pounded harder. The businessman beside her finally looked up from his screen. Military jets, what's that about? Training exercise, said, her voice steady, borrowed from the mask she had worn too many times before. Happens often in this corridor. He nodded, satisfied with the lie, but eyes stayed fixed on the window. Training exercises didn't involve Air Force One. Training exercises didn't reroute commercial flights into the arms of Space Force security. This was no exercise. The descent came hard and fast, faster than any standard approach. The escort tightened, weaving them into an invisible net. On the ground below, lights flared across the base, vehicles already in motion, as though they had been waiting. Waiting for her. The wheels kissed the runway with surgical precision. For a breath, silence lingered, then the ground came alive. Convoys, armed vehicles racing to intercept. Not baggage handlers, not fuel trucks, security, tactical. Passengers murmured now, the hum of confusion spreading row to row. Complaints rose. What kind of delay is this? I have a meeting in Denver. What's going on? Said nothing. Her body leaned forward, every sense tuned sharp, watching, counting, measuring weapons, uniforms, formations. This wasn't random, this wasn't confusion. This was precision, a military response, and every pattern pointed inward. The door opened. Not ground crew, soldiers, tactical gear, weapons strapped, movements efficient. They moved row by row, checking IDs, questions short and clipped. And when they reached her row, the air shifted. A glance held too long. A voice clipped into a radio. Confirmation. Target identified. Ms. Martinez, we'll need you to come with us for additional screening. The businessman frowned. What's this about? Routine security protocol, sir. The sergeant's voice was smooth, practiced. Routine. Nothing about this was routine. Gathered her bag. Her legs carried her forward, but inside the weight grew heavier. The stares of other passengers trailed after her, confusion and annoyance in their eyes. They didn't know. They couldn't. In a few hours, they'd have their story about a strange landing and a minor delay. But wasn't heading for refreshments and apologies. She was heading into the unknown. The air outside was colder, sharper. The armored vehicle waiting at the base of the stairs was no shuttle bus. Guards flanked her. Weapons glinted. Looked once more at the aircraft she had boarded as a tourist, thinking only of Denver and her sister. Now she wasn't a passenger. She was the reason the sky had filled with fighters, the reason Air Force One had shadowed their wings, the reason this entire base had moved like a machine wound tight. She climbed into the armored vehicle, the door sealing behind her with a final, echoing thud. And in the silence that followed, she understood. She wasn't just caught in a misunderstanding. She was the storm center. Why was the room so quiet? Sat in the chair, the kind built not for comfort but for control, her hands flat on the table, her eyes on the blank walls that seemed to lean closer with every minute. White paint, buzzing fluorescent light, no clock to mark the passing time. She'd been left alone for so long that silence itself became a weapon, pressing against her ears, amplifying her thoughts until they turned restless, dangerous. She had been in rooms like this before, but never on this side of the table. The door opened. Two people entered, their movements rehearsed, practiced. One in uniform, Air Force Major, insignia glinting sharp under the light. The other in a dark suit, civilian but with the posture of authority, the quiet threat of someone who never needed to raise his voice. "Ms. Martinez," the major said, settling into the chair opposite. "I'm Major Torres, Air Force Intelligence. This is Agent Michael, Department of Homeland Security." Kept her posture straight, her voice measured. "I'd like to know why I was pulled from a civilian flight and brought here against my will." Agent leaned forward, his expression carved in polite indifference. "You're not under arrest. You're not charged with anything yet. We simply have some questions. Questions about inconsistencies that have come to our attention." "Inconsistencies," repeated, letting the word hang in the sterile air. Major Torres opened a thick folder. Photographs spilled across the table, glossy prints of her aircraft restoration shop in Phoenix. Angles too precise to be accidental. Surveillance. Someone had been watching her. "You operate Martinez Aviation Services," Torres said evenly. "You specialize in restoring vintage military aircraft for civilian use." Nodded once. "All fully licensed, all documented. You can check the FAA and the DoD approvals yourself." "Oh, we have." Torres slid another photograph forward, an F-16 in her hangar, sleek, unmistakable though stripped of its weapons. "This aircraft, for instance." "A 1987 F-16C," said carefully. "Converted for air show use. Every system disabled. Every modification cleared." "Yes," Agent tapped the picture. "And you filed very thorough paperwork for this acquisition, almost too thorough." Her chest tightened. "What are you implying?" "That some of the authorization codes you filed," Torres said, "don't exist." Stared at her, disbelief breaking through her calm. She had checked, double-checked, triple-checked. She had every document, every authorization. The idea that her work was fraudulent, it wasn't possible. "That's a lie," she said quietly. "Is it?" Slid a new document forward. A purchase agreement. Her signature sat at the bottom. But the rest, authorization codes she didn't recognize, contractor details that weren't the same, and most damning of all, a clause she had never signed. Permission for the transfer of technical specifications along with the aircraft. Felt the floor tilt beneath her. "This isn't mine," she said, sharper now. "I never signed this version." "It's the one filed with the FAA," Torres countered smoothly. "It's the one reviewed by the Department of Defense. It's the one that suggests you may have transferred classified military technology." Shook her head, pulse hammering. Someone had swapped her documents. replace them in official systems. She could see it now, the invisible hand rewriting her history while she lived unaware. "This is a setup," she said. Agent's expression remained calm, unreadable. "That's a serious accusation. Who would want to frame you?" "I don't know," admitted. "But I can tell you this, I've never sold classified technology. I've never worked with foreign operatives, and I've never committed a crime." Tor's hand moved deliberately across the folder. More evidence appeared on the table: phone logs, emails, text messages, each stamped with times and dates, each painting her as someone engaged in shadowy deals with foreign names she had never heard before. She leaned closer. "I don't know these people. I've never sent these messages. These aren't my accounts. None of this is real." But the weight of the folder said otherwise. "You expect us to believe," Torres said, "that every record here is fabricated. Every transaction, every communication." Met her eyes steady, refusing to bend. "Yes." For a moment the Major's calm cracked. A flicker, impatience, frustration. Then it was gone, replaced with cool professionalism. Leaned back, folding his hands. "You're facing potential violations of the Arms Export Control Act, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and possibly even the Espionage Act. Federal crimes, 20 years to life." Exhaled slowly. "Then I want a lawyer." Silence, the air thickened. Torres finally closed the folder. "That's your right, but I should warn you, this case involves national security. Access to counsel may be limited." It wasn't a warning, it was a threat. Leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of it press against her ribs, but refusing to let them see her fear. They wanted her cracked, pliant, ready to sign whatever confession they dangled. But she had been trained to endure pressure far worse than this. When they left, the silence returned, heavier than before. She knew the cameras were watching, recording every twitch of her face, every restless tap of her fingers. She forced herself still, forced herself to think like the officer she once was. Someone had built this trap for her, carefully, patiently, replacing documents, fabricating trails, manipulating official systems. This wasn't just sloppily hidden corruption. This was deliberate, surgical. And it wasn't just about her. She felt it in her gut. She had become a piece in a much larger game. The question was what she had done, years ago, to make herself worth the effort of such a frame. The door opened again. This time only one man entered. Older, weathered. Gray hair cropped to regulation length, the eyes of someone who had carried secrets too long. He wore a colonel's uniform. "Captain Martinez," he said, using the rank she hadn't heard in years. "I'm Colonel Price." Straightened instinctively, suspicion tightening her shoulders. He glanced at the corners of the room, at the cameras. Then he pulled a small device from his pocket, pressed a button, and the faint hum of surveillance died. "Signal jammer," he said quietly. "We have maybe 10 minutes." Studied his face, searching for deception. "Who are you really?" "Someone who knows you're being set up," Price said, "and someone who can tell you why." Her pulse leapt. He leaned forward, his voice low, steady. 8 years ago, you flew missions under Operation Ghost Rider." The words hit like a thunderclap. Ghost Rider, mission so classified that even the pilots weren't told their full scope. Coordinates, orders, silence, nothing more. "You were part of mission GR-47, Price continued. "September 15, 2016, surveillance of suspected weapons facilities." His breath caught, she remembered. The mission where her camera system malfunctioned, recording continuously instead of snapping targeted frames. She had reported it, filed it as equipment error, and never seen the footage. "You recorded 47 minutes, Price said, his voice grave. "Footage that was supposed to be destroyed, it was." Her chest tightened. What did it show? Price's eyes held hers. Evidence of a rogue operation. American personnel and foreign nationals conducting unauthorized weapons transfers. billions of dollars in illegal profits, protected by a network of officers, contractors, intelligence operatives. His breath stilled. And now, Price said, that network has decided you're a liability. The room tilted around her. They're framing you, he continued, so that if anyone investigates Ghost Rider, if anyone comes across that footage, your testimony can be dismissed as the words of a convicted traitor. Shook her head, denial warring with the flood of dread. I never saw the footage. I didn't even know. That doesn't matter, Price interrupted. You were the pilot, your logs, your flight path. Your testimony could unravel the entire operation. They can't risk that. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Ghost Rider. Missions buried so deep she hadn't even spoken of them in dreams. And now, 8 years later, the ghosts had come for her. Price leaned closer. I don't have much time. Tonight they'll try to move you. Once you're gone, no one will hear from you again. If you want to survive, if you want the truth to survive, you'll have to fight. The door rattled, someone outside. Price leaned back quickly, switching off the jammer, his face settling into official neutrality just as Major Torres entered, folder in hand. Captain Martinez, she said crisply, we've prepared a confession. If you sign, we can reduce your sentence. Cooperation will serve you better than denial. She slid the paper forward, a document that would bind to crimes she had never committed. Price's hand tapped the table softly, rhythm deliberate. A signal, military code. She knew it instantly. Trust me, play along. Looked at the confession, her reflection staring back from the paper. She felt the weight of 2 futures pressing against her chest. If she signed, she was finished. If she refused, she might never walk free again. Her voice was quiet, calm, the voice of someone who had learned to hide the storm within. I'll need time to think. Torres' eyes narrowed. You have until morning. The folder snapped shut, the door closed. Sat in silence, the paper's ghost still on the table before her, her pulse echoing in her ears. She had boarded a plane as a tourist. She had become a prisoner in a conspiracy she hadn't asked to see. And now she understood the truth. She wasn't caught in some random trap. She was being erased. How long could she pretend to be calm while the walls closed in? The hours crawled. Every second in that cell tasted of metal and dread, yet forced herself to breathe evenly, to sit straight, to let the cameras see only stillness. Inside, though, her thoughts raced, replaying Colonel Price's warning like a loop. Tonight they'll move you. Once you're gone, no one will hear from you again. She had heard those kinds of warnings before, whispered across dim bases in far-off wars. But this time, the enemy wasn't across an ocean. This time it wore her own country's insignia. At 200 hours, the silence broke. A faint crackle in the corner of the cell froze, her ears straining. A voice, clipped, military, emerging from static. Falcon 9, this is Eagle Base. Do you copy? Her hand moved instinctively, brushing beneath the desk where her fingertips caught a small receiver taped to the underside, just as Price had said it would be. She pressed once. Acknowledged. Package delivery in 15 minutes. Window, northwest ground level. One press again. Acknowledged. His pulse quickened. This was real. Price hadn't lied. Someone on the outside, someone in uniform or close enough to it, was moving for her. She moved to the small window, narrow and reinforced, overlooking the airstrip beyond. Shadows stretched across the tarmac, floodlights sweeping, patrols moving like clockwork. She waited, every nerve on fire. At exactly 2:17, she saw movement. A figure hugging the shadows near the base of her building. The gait wasn't random. This was someone trained, disciplined, slipping between pools of light. The figure placed something at the wall, glanced once at the upper windows, then melted back into darkness. The package. Didn't hesitate. She dragged the desk chair to the window, climbing up. Her fingers found the vent grate already loosened, as if someone had known she would come. She twisted the screws free, metal whispering against metal. Her breath came sharp as she squeezed her body through the narrow gap, shoulders scraping, lungs constricting. And then freedom. She dropped into the cold night air, knees bending to soften the landing. The package was waiting, a small backpack, civilian clothes, fake IDs, a tablet glowing with instructions. And her heart caught a portable hard drive, black tape scrawled with white letters, Operation Ghost Rider complete files. Her hand trembled as she touched it, proof. She changed quickly behind the building, trading her prison blues for jeans and a dark jacket. When she powered the tablet, a single line appeared on the screen. Building 47, 2, Colonel Price is waiting. Her breath fogged in the cold air. Building 47 lay across the base, tucked into the sprawl of administrative offices. To reach it, she would have to cross patrol routes, cameras, and a base crawling with men and women trained to see what others didn't. But wasn't anyone, she was Falcon 9. She moved low, slipping through the dark like she had been trained to years ago. Every step calculated, every pause measured against the sweep of lights and the rhythm of boots on asphalt. She counted seconds, mapped blind spots, timed her movements until the distance shrank. At last, Building 47 rose before her. It looked ordinary, an administrative block with beige walls and blank windows. But when she used the card hidden in the backpack, a panel slid open to reveal an elevator. She stepped inside. The doors shut, and the descent began. When they opened, she entered another world. Banks of computers hummed softly. Monitors lined the walls, glowing with real-time intelligence feeds, satellite tracks, encrypted messages, video from surveillance drones. Desks were manned by personnel who didn't wear standard insignia but carried themselves with the posture of professionals who knew the stakes. In the center stood Colonel Price. Beside him, a woman in civilian clothes, sharp eyes, steel-gray streaks in her dark hair. She carried herself like someone who had lived her life in shadows. "Captain Martinez," Price said formally. "This is Major Kelly Singh, formerly Air Force Intelligence, now with the Inspector General's office." Singh extended her hand. "You've seen only pieces. Tonight you'll see everything." Gripped the hand strong, steady, then followed Singh to a screen. A video began to play, grainy, black and white, but familiar in its perspective. Her heart seized. It was her aircraft's camera feed. "Mission GR-47, Singh said. "September 15, 2016, the footage that was supposed to be destroyed." The desert rolled beneath the lens, at first ordinary. Then the compound came into view, not abandoned, not silent, alive, vehicles moving, personnel on the ground. The footage zoomed closer, catching details that twisted stomach. American uniforms, crates marked with ordnance codes, trucks bearing no insignia, men in civilian clothes directing the transfer. Price's voice was low, heavy. Weapon systems that official records list as destroyed. Instead, they were sold to foreign buyers who paid billions. Singh froze the frame on a group of figures. Even in grainy detail, the faces were visible. "Recognize him." Stared, her mind fumbled with memory until the recognition snapped sharp. A Pentagon officer she had once seen in briefings. "That's Major," Singh confirmed. "Pentagon, Defense Technology Security Administration." She pointed at another figure, taller, older. "And that's General Robert Sterling. Oversaw technology transfers for the entire Middle East theater." His pulse thundered. The evidence was undeniable. She turned to Singh. "Why hasn't this come out?" "Because," Singh said grimly, "everyone who could speak is dead." Price's voice cut in, steady as stone. 3 pilots from Ghost Rider, each killed in accidents that weren't accidents, crashes, equipment failures, all ruled unfortunate, all too convenient. The room seemed colder. "And me?" asked. "Your death," Singh said, "would raise too many questions. Your shop, your family, your visibility, they couldn't erase you quietly. So they chose another path, frame you, break you, make your name synonymous with betrayal so that if you ever spoke, no one would believe a word. His hand tightened on the edge of the table. She had thought she left war behind. She had thought the ghosts of her missions were buried. But now those ghosts had risen, and they had names, faces, bank accounts dripping with blood money. Price turned to her. We've been building this case for years, tracking payments, mapping shell companies, intercepting communications. But what we lacked was proof that connected the highest levels of command to the operation. That's where you come in. Your footage, your testimony, it changes everything. Felt the weight press down on her. Proof meant power. Proof meant danger. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, Singh said, we need you to go back. Blinked back. You're still officially in custody, Price explained. Tors and her handlers think they control you. They're planning a meeting tonight, 4 a.m., Building 23. Their final coordination before they move you off the grid. If you go back, play along and wear this. He held up a small device, no bigger than a coin. You'll record everything, their voices, their admissions, their plan. Stared at it. Something so small it could vanish beneath a button. Something so dangerous it could cost her life if discovered. They'll search me, she said. Not if you look broken, Singh replied. Not if they believe the sedatives did their work. Swallowed hard. The thought of pretending to bend, of letting Tors lean close, smug and certain, while hiding the very device that could destroy her, terror mixed with something else. Resolve. Price pressed something else into her palm. A pill, small and white. Emergency extraction, he said. Simulates a medical crisis. If they discover you, if you're seconds from collapse, take it. We'll get you out, but understand, if you use it, the entire operation ends. No evidence, no proof, just survival. Closed her fingers around the pill. Her eyes met his, and if I don't use it? Price's voice was quiet. Then you'll walk into the fire, and you'll come out with the truth. The words lingered, heavy, undeniable. She slid the device beneath her shirt, close to her skin, where no one would think to look. The pill hid in her pocket, a last line she prayed never to cross. As Singh led her to the hidden elevator, back toward the tunnels that would return her to her cell, felt the weight settle fully. She was no longer a passenger dragged into a storm. She was a witness, armed with proof that could topple generals. And if she failed, she would be just another casualty buried under the word accident. The tunnels swallowed her. The cell walls closed around her again. By the time the guards checked her at 2300 hours, she was already playing the role. Slurred movements, drooping eyelids, the perfect mask of a sedated prisoner. They nodded, logged her condition, moved on. She waited, breath shallow, device pressed against her chest. And when footsteps approached at 3:45, when the door opened and Major Tors entered with her entourage, let her head droop, let her voice stumble. What did you give me? Tors' smile was sharp, confident, just something to help you relax. They believed she was broken. But beneath her shirt, the green light of the recorder blinked steady. And in that moment Martinez knew the game had turned. Why did their footsteps echo so loud in the corridor? Kept her head bowed, every muscle slack, as if the sedatives had dulled her into obedience. But her mind was a razor's edge. Each step toward Building 23 was a countdown, each echo of boots a reminder that one mistake could expose her, and then the little device hidden against her skin would be the last thing she ever carried. Major Tors walked at her side, her posture brimming with confidence, as though she were shepherding a lamb to slaughter. 2 armed guards trailed behind. The building loomed ahead, featureless concrete, no windows, no signs. A place designed to vanish from official maps while hiding things too dangerous for daylight. Inside, the air was colder, sterile. A conference room awaited, its long table lined with files, laptops, steaming coffee untouched. At the head sat a man recognized instantly, even though she wished she didn't. General Robert Sterling. The man from the footage. The face caught in her aircraft's camera 8 years ago, bartering weapons in the desert. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes were colder than the metals pinned to his chest. Beside him sat Major, the Pentagon officer Singh had named, the one who handled technology transfers. His smirk was faint, practiced, someone who believed the world would never touch him. Torres guided to a chair. Captain Martinez, you've wasted a great deal of our time with denials. Tonight we put an end to that. Let her body sag, her lips parted just enough to whisper, broken and uncertain. I don't understand. Sterling's gaze never softened. What you need to understand is simple. You have two paths: cooperation, which grants you leniency and comfort, or refusal, which ensures you vanish so thoroughly that not even your sister will remember your name. His voice was calm, smooth, terrifying in its lack of effort. Leaned forward, sliding a folder toward her. Sign this. A full confession. You admit to falsifying documents, transferring sensitive data, aiding foreign contacts. In exchange, you live. Quietly. Disgraced, yes, but alive. You'll even keep a reduced sentence under controlled watch. Stared at the papers. Every line dripped with lies, yet each was crafted to look irrefutable. Her own signature forged at the bottom, practiced so well it almost fooled her eyes. Torres tilted her head. It's the best offer you'll ever receive. Let her hands tremble, fingers hovering over the pen they offered. Her heart raced, not just with fear, but with the knowledge that the recorder beneath her shirt was catching every word, every threat, every admission that this was a fabrication. She whispered, voice shaking, "Why me? Why go this far?" Chuckled softly. "Because, Falcon 9, you were in the wrong sky at the wrong time. That camera of yours saw things it shouldn't have. And when you filed your malfunction report, you didn't even realize the gold you carried. We couldn't destroy it without drawing suspicion. So we destroyed everyone connected instead." Felt her throat constrict. They weren't just confirming the conspiracy, they were confessing to murder. Sterling's voice cut in, sharp and decisive. "We gave you years of peace, years to fade into obscurity, but you chose visibility. You chose to restore aircraft, to put yourself back on our radar. That was your mistake." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "Now we tidy loose ends." The room seemed to shrink. Forced her breathing to stumble, her words to slur. I'll sign, I just need time." Exchanged a glance with Sterling, a smirk tugging at his lips. "She's breaking. The sedatives are doing their job." Sterling nodded once. "Leave her, let her think. By morning she signs or she disappears." The guards escorted Torres and out, leaving Sterling alone with for a moment. The general stood, his shadow stretching long across the room. "You think you understand loyalty," he said quietly. "But loyalty is not to a flag or a uniform or some moral compass. Loyalty is survival. Those who adapt live, those who cling to ideals die." He moved closer, his presence suffocating. "Think carefully, Captain. Ideals won't keep you breathing." Then he turned, the door clicking shut behind him. Sat in silence, her pulse hammering, the recorder still glowing faint against her skin. Every word was there now, the threats, the admissions, the philosophy of corruption. But her mission wasn't over. She needed them all, Sterling, Torres. She needed a complete web, a net that no one could deny. Her hands clenched in her lap. For the first time in years, she felt the cockpit fire in her veins, the clarity of a mission that was larger than herself. She wasn't here to survive. She was here to expose. The hours until dawn were long. Guards checked on her, indifferent, convinced she was subdued. Played the part flawlessly, eyes half shut, movements sluggish. But inside, her mind was a battlefield of strategy and memory. At 600, the trio returned. Sterling led, his uniform crisp, his patience thinner. "Decision time," he said flatly. Forced her hand to tremble as she reached for the pen. She lifted it slowly, her breath uneven, eyes half-lidded. Then softly she asked, "What happens if I refuse?" Tor's answer came like ice. "Then you're transferred tonight. No trial, no family visits, no trace. You'll be listed as a flight risk who escaped and vanished, and within weeks no one will remember you existed." Lowered the pen, "So either way I lose." Smirked, "Not entirely. At least with cooperation you'll still have air to breathe." Sterling's gaze was hard. "Choose." The recorder caught it all, their cruelty, their certainty, their plan. His heart pounded. She couldn't let her defiance slip yet. Not here, not while surrounded. So she whispered, broken, "I'll sign." The pen touched paper. Her name crawled across the page, shaky, unsteady, perfect for their illusion of defeat. Sterling exhaled, satisfied. "Good, now we control the narrative." Torres collected the paper, smiling faintly. "Welcome to obscurity, Captain." Lowered her gaze, hiding the fire behind her eyes. When they left, the guards locked the room. Alone, let her mask drop, her breathing sharp, her hand steady now. The recorder pressed against her skin like a heartbeat. Proof, irrefutable proof. But proof meant nothing if she never left this building alive. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing the small pill Price had given her. A last resort, a trigger for chaos and extraction. But she wasn't ready to play that card. Not yet. Not until she had gathered every piece. Because if she walked out of here with only a half-truth, Sterling's machine would bury it in disinformation. She needed the whole picture, the final meeting, the names, the chain of command. Her mission was no longer survival. It was exposure. And she would risk everything, her life, her freedom, her silence, for that one chance. Why did the convoy feel more like a funeral procession than a transfer? Sat in the back of a reinforced SUV, wrists cuffed, two guards beside her, their rifles angled casually but ready. The convoy rumbled through pre-dawn roads, headlights cutting thin beams into the desert darkness. 4 vehicles total, 2 lead cars, her transport, and 1 trailing close behind. Efficient, controlled, designed to smother any possibility of escape. To the guards, she was nothing more than a subdued prisoner, a pilot who had broken under the weight of her own lies. They laughed softly, trading stories that blurred into white noise, but didn't listen. Her eyes flicked instead to the faint reflection in the window, the pulse of green light still steady beneath her jacket. The recorder was alive. Every word Sterling, Torres, and had spoken was alive. She only had to survive long enough to deliver it. The desert stretched endless around them. No towns, no witnesses, just miles of empty highway where erasure could happen without interruption. Felt the tension coil in her chest. This wasn't a transfer to another facility. This was a transfer to nowhere. At mile marker 78 she felt it. The shift. The convoy slowed, engines growling lower, radios crackling. The lead vehicle veered off onto a side road, the others following without question. A dirt track, remote, forgotten. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't standard procedure. This was disposal. The guard on her right stretched, yawning, as though the outcome was so certain it required no vigilance. Studied the position of his holster, the angle of his rifle, the casualness of his arrogance. Every detail mattered now. The SUV jolted as it left pavement, bouncing across the dirt. In the dim light, saw the outline of a derelict airstrip ahead, crumbling tarmac, rusting hangars, a control tower leaning like a relic from another era, a perfect graveyard for secrets. The vehicles rolled to stop, doors opened, orders barked. "Move her." The guards pulled out, boots crunching against gravel. Cold air bit her skin. She kept her body slack, her expression empty, letting them believe the sedative still dulled her senses. But every nerve was alert, every muscle ready. Torres stood ahead, framed by the silhouette of the hangar. Her arms were folded, her smile faint, self-satisfied. "This is where your story ends," she said softly. His pulse hammered. She forced her voice to break, to sound pleading. "Please, you don't have to do this." Torres tilted her head. "I do. Loose ends unravel tapestries, and you, Captain Martinez, are one thread too dangerous to leave untouched." The trailing SUV opened. Sterling stepped out, his uniform sharp even here in the dirt, his authority radiating like a storm front. Followed, carrying a folder that looked like a death certificate waiting to be signed. Sterling's voice was calm, almost bored. "End it quickly. No theatrics." The guards tightened their grip. One raised his weapon, the barrel glinting in the pale dawn. And in that suspended second knew, if she hesitated, if she clung to fear, the recorder would die with her. The truth would vanish into this desert. Her hand moved fast, faster than they expected from a woman they thought broken. She shifted her weight, slammed her shoulder into the guard on her left, twisting her body to use his bulk as a shield. The gunfire cracked, loud, shattering the dawn, and the guard collapsed against her, his weapon skittering free. Chaos erupted. Dove grabbing the weapon, rolling behind the SUV as bullets sparked against metal. Gravel sprayed, shouts filled the air. She fired a burst, not at Sterling or Torres, not yet, but at the tires of the lead vehicle. Rubber exploded, the vehicle sagging uselessly. Panic rippled. Guards scrambled, disoriented by the sudden resistance from someone they thought sedated. His mind worked like a cockpit computer. Angles, cover, timing. She wasn't here to win a battle. She was here to survive long enough to keep the evidence alive. A spotlight flared from the hangar. Figures moved, more men, reinforcements, their silhouettes sharp against the glare. Too many, far too many. His pulse roared in her ears. She ducked back behind the SUV, bullets shredding the air around her. She clutched the recorder against her chest through her jacket, whispering to herself like a mantra, "Stay alive, stay alive." From across the chaos, Sterling's voice cut sharp. "Don't kill her yet, disable her." A command that betrayed him. A man who needed her silenced, not dead, at least not until he had control of the narrative. The recorder caught it all. His eyes locked on the crumbling hangar ahead. A structure with shadows, with angles, with possibilities. Her only chance. She fired another burst to scatter the guards, then sprinted, cuffs biting into her wrists, gravel tearing at her boots. Shouts chased her, bullets slicing air, but adrenaline carried her forward until she crashed into the darkness of the hangar. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil. Old machinery lay scattered, rusting. She ducked behind a half-collapsed plane fuselage, chest heaving, the recorder still pulsing against her. Voices grew closer, Torres barking orders, Sterling cold and precise. "She won't get far. Surround the hangar, close it down." Pressed her back against the cold metal, heart pounding so hard she thought it might betray her hiding spot. She pulled the small pill from her pocket, staring at it. One swallow and Price's team would move, extraction triggered. But extraction meant ending the mission now, with only half the truth. If she escaped tonight, yes, she would live. But Sterling would twist the evidence, drown it in propaganda, and she'd spend the rest of her life running. Her jaw tightened. No, not yet. She tucked the pill back into her pocket and scanned the hangar. Her eyes found a maintenance ladder climbing toward the rafters, shadows swallowing the upper beams. Height meant visibility. Height meant time. She climbed, careful, silent, until she reached the beams high above. From here she saw the entire hangar floor, guards sweeping in formation, rifles raised, Torres packing like a predator. And then movement at the far wall. A vent cover sliding, a shadow emerging, Price's signal. Relief crashed over her. He hadn't abandoned her. But the relief twisted instantly into dread. He wasn't alone. Another shadow followed Singh. Their faces were grim, focused, but alive. They had risked everything to breach this place. Tor's eyes snapped toward the movement. There, at the vent. Gunfire erupted. Didn't think. She swung down from the rafters, firing to draw attention to split their aim. Bullets shredded the air around her, sparks flying from metal beams. Price shouted, voice cutting through the chaos, "Get to the vent." She hit the ground hard, rolled and sprinted toward them, bullets cracking at her heels. Singh extended her hand, grip firm, pulling through the gap just as Tor's shout echoed behind. "Don't let her escape." The three of them dropped into darkness, the vent ceiling shut behind. They ran, the tunnels vibrating with shouts and pounding boots above, clutched the recorder like it was her own heartbeat, her voice breaking with urgency. "I got it. Their admissions, sterling, everything." Price's eyes met hers in the dim light. "Then we hold the truth. Now we just have to live long enough to use it." The tunnel curved into blackness, swallowing them whole, while above the hangar erupted in fury. How far could a person run when the truth itself weighed heavier than chains? The tunnel stretched in darkness, narrow concrete veins beneath the desert base, each step echoing louder than the last. Lungs burned, her wrists raw against the cuffs still digging into her skin. Price ran just ahead, his frame steady despite the weight of years, while Singh covered the rear, her pistol raised, every flicker of shadow a possible target. Above them, muffled shouts rumbled like thunder. Boots pounded across the hangar, men barking orders, radios crackling. The enemy knew they had slipped underground, and now the chase was on. His grip never left the recorder, pressed to her chest beneath the jacket. Every word Sterling and had spoken lived inside it. A truth so damning it could topple a career, a government, maybe even the faith of a nation, but only if it survived long enough to reach the light. Price's voice cut through the dark. "Left turn ahead, maintenance shaft, leads out near the old drainage canal." They skidded around the corner, breath ragged, feet pounding. Singh stopped suddenly, firing two sharp shots down the tunnel behind them. The echoes rolled like cannon fire. "They're close," she hissed. His pulse hammered. She wanted to ask how close, but she already knew, close enough that if she faltered, she'd never see the sunrise. At the maintenance shaft, Price hauled open a rusted grate, motioning through first. The metal groaned as she squeezed into the narrow passage, her shoulders scraping concrete, dust choking her throat. Every inch felt like a coffin. She forced herself forward, dragging her body until she tumbled out onto a wider stretch of tunnel. Singh emerged after, sweat glistening on her brow, followed by Price, his jaw tight with focus. They kept moving. At last a faint glow appeared ahead, moonlight spilling through a barred drainage outlet. Freedom, thin and fragile. Price pulled a crowbar from his pack, wedging it into the bars. His muscles strained, metal shrieking, until the rusted bolts snapped loose. The grate fell outward, crashing into weeds. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of sage and desert sand. Scrambled out, her boots sinking into the dry canal bed. Singh and Price followed. For the first time in hours, the open sky stretched above them, pale stars dimming with the approach of dawn. But freedom was not silence. Behind them, the tunnel roared with voices, the hunt still closing. Price didn't hesitate. "We move now." They sprinted across the canal, climbing the opposite embankment, every step tearing its lungs. She didn't look back, couldn't look back. Fear lived there, and she couldn't afford it. At the top, a battered jeep waited, half hidden beneath a tarp. Singh yanked it free, jumped behind the wheel. Price shoved into the back, then leapt in as Singh floored the accelerator. Gravel sprayed as the jeep lunged forward, engine growling. The desert blurred around them. Flat plains, dry brush. No cover, no safety, just speed and distance. Gripped the recorder, her voice breaking. "How long until they know where we're heading?" Price's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "They already know." The words hit like a strike to the chest. He turned, his gaze heavy. "You think this ends with Sterling and it doesn't. This network goes higher, deeper. Every communication we intercepted points to coordination at levels that make Sterling look like a middle manager. His breath caught. How high? Price's silence was answer enough. Singh's knuckles whitened on the wheel. They've killed pilots, agents. They buried entire units to keep this quiet. And if we fail, Captain, they'll bury us too. Look down at the recorder, the small blinking light pulsing like a heartbeat. Proof. But proof was only as strong as the hands that carried it. The jeep tore across the desert, bumping over dry ridges, rattling through sagebrush. Behind them, faint headlights appeared on the horizon. Pursuit vehicles. Fast, closing. Price snapped orders. Singh, push it. Martinez, glove compartment now. Yanked it open. Inside lay a pistol and 2 extra magazines. Her hands shook as she grabbed them, the old weight familiar but foreign after years away. She hadn't touched a weapon since leaving the service. Her shop, her tools, her planes, they were supposed to be her new world. But tonight, the past had clawed her back with blood-stained hands. She loaded the weapon, the metallic click echoing louder than the engine. Singh swerved hard, throwing dust into the night as the headlights behind grew brighter. 3 vehicles, Price called, glancing back. Light armor, they'll try to box us in. Raised the pistol, aiming through the back window. The headlights wove closer, beams bouncing across the desert floor. Her breath slowed, instincts surfacing. She wasn't in a jeep. She was in a cockpit again, calculating angles, speed, distance. She squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked, echoing across the night. One of the headlights shuddered, glass exploding. The vehicle swerved, slowed. The other 2 pressed harder. Price's voice was steady. Good, again. Fired twice more. Sparks danced off a grill, a tire shredded. Another vehicle fishtailed, spinning into the dust. But the third remained, closing fast. A burst of gunfire tore across the jeep's side, bullets sparking off metal. Singh cursed, swerving sharply. Ducked low, heart pounding, then popped up to return fire. The recoil jolted through her arms, but her aim held. Another burst shattered the windshield of the pursuing vehicle, forcing it to veer back. Silence returned, broken only by the jeep's roar. Price exhaled. That buys us time, not much. His arms trembled. She lowered the pistol, staring at her shaking hands. The conflict churned in her chest, relief tangled with guilt. She hadn't wanted to kill. She hadn't wanted to step back into this life. But here she was, weapon in hand, once more defined by survival. Price's voice softened, almost a whisper meant only for her. You didn't choose this fight, Captain, but it chose you. And if you don't carry it, no one will. Stared at the recorder, the tiny light still blinking. The weight of it pressed heavier than the pistol. Proof was powerful, but proof was also poison. To hold it was to be marked, hunted, erased. The jeep bounced hard, jolting her back. Ahead, Singh pointed. Quarter mile. A squat adobe building appeared, half buried in the desert, camouflaged to look like ruins. Singh braked hard, swinging the jeep behind it. They scrambled out, dragging gear. Inside, the smelled of dust and oil, but it was stocked. Maps on the table, radios, crates of supplies. Price shut the door, bolting it. For a moment, silence wrapped them. Sank into a chair, the recorder still clutched to her chest, her breath uneven. The room tilted with exhaustion and adrenaline. Singh knelt across from her, her eyes sharp but kind. You did well out there. Shook her head. I almost didn't pull the trigger. That hesitation, Singh said softly, that's what makes you different from them. They've forgotten what human lives mean. You haven't. Swallowed hard, guilt pressing heavy. She wasn't sure if that made her stronger or weaker. Price spread a map across the table, his voice clipped. We can't stay here long. They'll track us within hours. Our only chance is to move toward the border. Once we're out of their jurisdiction, we can get this to the right hands. His voice was barely a whisper. And if the right hands are already compromised? The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Price met her eyes. His voice was low, steady. Then we find new hands, one's not bought, one still loyal to what's right. Looked down at the recorder again, her reflection faint in its dark surface. Her life, her freedom, her peace, all of it had been shattered the moment she boarded that plane as a tourist. Now she carried something far larger than herself. The truth. But truth was fragile, and truth was hunted. Outside, the desert wind howled, rattling the broken windows like bones. And deep down knew this was only the beginning. Why did silence always come before betrayal? There was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the walls like it was listening. Sat at the wooden table, hands wrapped around a cup of bitter coffee Singh had pushed toward her, though she hadn't touched it. Her eyes never left the recorder. It sat in the center of the table, a small, unremarkable device, but the air around it felt charged, dangerous. Price studied the map with practiced calm, tracing routes with his calloused finger. Singh cleaned her weapon in silence, her movements precise, her eyes flicking to now and then as though gauging the cracks in her composure. But's mind wasn't on escape routes or calibers. It was trapped in a loop of questions. Who could be trusted? Who wasn't already bought? How many hands had Sterling already poisoned? The thought twisted until it choked her. What if even here in this room, betrayal waited? She forced her voice to cut through the air. Tell me the truth, Price. How deep does this go? Price's jaw flexed, his eyes lifting to hers. He hesitated, not long, but long enough for her chest to tighten. Deeper than we thought. The footage you captured years ago. Sterling wasn't freelancing. He was part of an authorized channel. They used contracts, black budgets, to funnel weapons where they weren't meant to be. His voice cracked. So this wasn't one general's corruption. It was sanctioned. Price nodded slowly. At levels we can't yet name, but your footage and now this confession threatens to expose the scaffolding. That's why they can't let you live. The coffee cup rattled faintly against the table from her shaking hands. She'd thought survival was the hardest battle. But this realization that the people she had once saluted, the oath she had lived by, might all be riddled with rot, that was a deeper wound than any bullet. Singh broke the silence, her voice sharp but steady. It doesn't matter how high it goes, truth still has weight, people still care. Met her eyes, searching for conviction, needing it. Singh's calm steadiness was a rope in a storm. But then a sound. A soft scrape against the door. Price froze, his head snapping up. Singh's hand moved instantly to her pistol. Pulse spiked, her breath caught. The second sound followed, the faint crunch of boots on gravel. Price hissed, "They've tracked us." Before he finished the words, the world erupted. Glass shattered inward as clattered across the floor. Light and thunder exploded, swallowing sight and sound. Threw herself to the ground, ears ringing, vision seared white. Shouts filled the air, boots pounding. Doors crashed open. Armed men stormed inside, their rifles sweeping the room like scythes. Instincts roared awake. She grabbed the recorder, shoving it inside her jacket, pressing it tight against her chest. If she lost everything else, this had to survive. Price was already firing controlled bursts that cut through the chaos. Singh rolled behind an overturned table, her shots sharp, deliberate, but there were too many. Shadows filled the room, muzzles flashing. Scrambled, heart hammering, ducking behind the table with Singh. Her hands fumbled for her pistol, the weapon heavy, her aim unsteady. A man lunged toward her. She fired. The shot cracked, the man dropped. Her arms trembled, her breath sharp, but she forced herself steady. This wasn't about killing. This was about surviving the next second, then the one after. Price shouted, his voice raw, "Out the back, move." Singh grabbed his arm, dragging her toward the narrow back door as Price laid down cover fire. Bullets splintered the wood around them, dust choking the air. They burst through into the desert night, cold wind slamming against their faces. Stumbled, nearly falling, but Singh shoved her forward. The horizon flickered with headlights, more vehicles. They were surrounded. Price skidded out behind them, blood streaking his sleeve, but his movements fierce, relentless. Split up. They can't follow all of us. His chest clenched. No, we stay together. But Price shook his head, eyes burning with a truth she didn't want to face. This isn't about us anymore. It's about that recorder. As long as it lives, we win. If it dies with you, we lose. The words cut through her like a blade. Singh gripped shoulders, urgent, desperate. Go east toward the ridge. We'll draw them west. Don't stop, don't look back. Shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. I can't leave you. Price's voice softened, even as gunfire sparked behind him. Sometimes survival is sacrifice. Sometimes carrying the truth means walking alone. And then he shoved her hard toward the dark. Stumbled, breath breaking, legs moving before her mind caught up. She ran, gravel slicing her palms when she tripped. The recorder pressed so hard to her chest it bruised her ribs. Behind her, the sound of battle roared, gunfire, shouting, Singh's voice fierce, Price's command sharp. She didn't turn back, she couldn't. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but still she ran. The ridge loomed ahead, jagged black against the pale dawn sky. Each step was agony, but stopping meant death. At the crest, she collapsed behind a boulder, gasping for air. The desert stretched endless before her, but behind there was a battlefield of fire and smoke. Shadows moved in the flickering light, but she couldn't tell, were they Singh and Price, or the men who hunted them. Her chest convulsed with sobs she couldn't contain. She pressed her forehead to the recorder, whispering through tears, "Please let them live." But the desert gave no answers. Hours seemed to stretch in silence. Her body trembled, exhaustion clawing at her. Yet she held the recorder as if it were her last tether to life, because maybe it was. And then footsteps. Froze, pistol raised, hands shaking. A shadow emerged over the ridge. Her breath caught. It was Singh. Blood streaked her arm, her face pale but her eyes alive. Surged forward, relief crashing into her like a wave. She caught Singh as she stumbled, holding her up. Where's Price? Where is he? Singh's silence was answer enough. The sob rose in his throat, tearing through her chest. She clutched Singh, grief and fury and guilt folding into one unbearable weight. Singh's voice was a rasp, barely audible. He bought us time, don't waste it. Nodded through tears, her jaw tightening, resolve hardening. Price's sacrifice wasn't just blood spilled in the dirt. It was a demand to carry truth where he no longer could. The recorder pulsed faintly against her chest, steady, alive. And in that moment knew, betrayal had tried to silence her. Corruption had tried to erase her. But as long as she breathed, as long as this device existed, they hadn't won. The desert wind howled around them, carrying ash and smoke across the horizon, and whispered into the storm, not for herself, but for the man who had given his life so she could still carry the truth. I won't let it die here. Why did the truth always demand a price in blood? The desert stretched endless before, but it wasn't freedom. It was a battlefield without walls. She half-carried Singh through the sagebrush, each step carving fire into her muscles. Dawn bled slowly across the horizon, painting the sky in bruised colors. With every breath she expected headlights, gunfire, the inevitable thunder of pursuit. The recorder pressed against her chest was heavier than steel now. Price's sacrifice lived inside it. His voice, his command, his faith that she would carry it farther than he could. That weight was unbearable, and yet it was the only thing that kept her upright. Singh stumbled, collapsing to her knees, knelt with her, panic tearing through her chest. Stay with me, please stay with me. Singh's face was pale, sweat glistening. She pressed her bloody hand over. You need to keep moving. If they catch us both, it's over. Shook her head fiercely, tears burning. No, I'm not leaving you, I can't. Singh's grip tightened, her voice breaking with urgency. Listen, Price gave us a chance. Don't waste it. There's a relay station east of here, 2 miles. If you get the recorder there, you can transmit, encrypt it, push it out before they shut it down. His heart seized, 2 miles on foot with hunters closing in. Singh's hand trembled. You've always carried the impossible, carry it now. Pressed her forehead against Singh, whispering through the storm of grief. I'll come back for you, I swear. But Singh's silence was answer enough. Rose, her legs trembling, her breath ragged. She clutched the recorder to her chest and turned toward the east, every step forward ripping her soul in half. The desert seemed endless, but the ridge soon gave way to a faint silhouette, an old relay tower, skeletal against the rising sun. Hope flickered in her chest, fragile, dangerous. And then the sound came. Engines. She froze, heart crashing against her ribs. 3 black SUVs barreled across the desert toward her, dust plumes rising like storm clouds. Sterling's net had found her. Her body screamed to run, but she knew the truth. She couldn't outrun engines. Not now. Not carrying the recorder, not after everything. Her hand slipped into her pocket, closing around the small pill. Price's last resort. One swallow and the beacon would flare, summoning an extraction team. But it would also trigger that erased the recorder, protecting it from capture. His chest constricted. She couldn't, not yet, she couldn't destroy the proof, not after Price, not after Singh. She sprinted instead, the relay tower drawing closer with every agonized step. The SUVs roared behind her, closing fast, the ground trembling beneath their weight. Gunfire cracked, dust exploded near her feet. She stumbled, nearly falling, but forced her body forward. The tower loomed larger, the metal ladder within reach. Her fingers caught the rung. She climbed, legs screaming, hands slipping with sweat. Bullets sparked against the steel around her. She climbed higher until she reached the platform near the top. The relay box waited, rusted, weathered, but alive. Dropped to her knees, fumbling the recorder free, connecting the wire. Her hands shook violently, vision blurring. She punched in the sequence Singh had drilled into her. Encryption codes, frequency bands, transmission bursts. The box hummed, lights flickered. And then a voice. Sterling's voice, cutting through a loudspeaker below. Captain Martinez, you can't win this. You think one recording will topple a system built over decades. It won't. All you'll do is die tired and no one will remember why. His hands froze on the keypad. The words were poison, seeping into the cracks of her exhaustion. A part of her wanted to believe him, to surrender to the futility, to let the recorder slip from her grip. But another voice rose inside her. Price's voice, Singh's voice, the voices of every pilot who never made it home, every name erased to keep secrets buried. She lifted her head, her voice carrying down the tower, raw but steady. Maybe you're right. Maybe the system won't fall, but the truth deserves air. And if I die here, it won't die with me. She hit the final key. The relay tower roared to life. A burst of data surged upward, invisible but unstoppable, flung into encrypted networks across the globe. The recorder's pulse brightened, its light flashing like a heartbeat in overdrive. Below, Sterling shouted, "Shut it down now." Gunfire erupted, tearing through the steel supports. The tower shuddered, clung to the rail, her body swaying with the structure's groan. The recorder beeped a sharp tone, transmission complete. Exhaled, her body collapsing against the metal. Relief washed through her, fierce and devastating. The truth was out. The SUVs circled below, rifles raised, muzzles aimed. Sterling stepped from one, his uniform immaculate even in the dust, his face a mask of fury. He shouted upward, "You've doomed yourself, come down and I'll make it quick." Stared down at him, her chest heaving. For the first time in years, she felt calm. There was nothing left to run from, nothing left to hide. Her fingers slipped into her pocket, brushing the small pill. One choice left, surrender and be erased, or vanish on her own terms. She whispered, voice soft as prayer, "Price sing, I carried it." And then she closed her hand around the pill. The wind howled across the desert, rattling the steel beams, as made her choice. When the tower finally collapsed under gunfire, smoke and dust rising into the dawn, no body was found. Only twisted steel, only silence. But hours later, across encrypted networks, newsrooms and military servers lit up with the same message. Files decrypted, voices recorded, admissions undeniable, Sterling's words, threats, Tor's orders, all of it laid bare for the world to hear. The truth had escaped the desert. And though Martinez was never seen again, her call sign lived. Whispered in briefing rooms, carried in quiet toasts by pilots across the world. Not Falcon 9 the soldier, not Captain Martinez the accused, but the woman who carried the truth when no one else could. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.